Here we are with an important topic, administrative reform. And we often hear the kind of story or the refrain that we need to reform government. And, some of this is the idea of government that governs the least governs best, or we need government to solve our problems, right? These are kind of two different approaches of can the government be the instrument of progress, or is government in the way of progress, right? And so, as this is a paradox. We've started with paradoxes before. At the same time, we all want smaller, more efficient government, more services and better performance, lower taxes and higher quality, less bureaucracy and more accountability. Reform movements try to resolve these very serious contradictions. Reform matters, right? It's not just academic theory. Reform movements are going to shape your future workplace. They're going to shape how school districts organize and operate, how technology permitting agencies use to manage applications, how public works departments are approaching service delivery, and how agencies are measuring and reporting performance. We just recently celebrated the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We were born from dissatisfaction with the existing government. The 50 states serve as laboratories of democracy. Regular elections create pressure for change. We often think that if it works in the private sector, it's going to work for government. And reform is sometimes driven by major problems. So we're going to go through some kind of eras of reform. The cycle continues. We often think, how do we reform government? One of these early eras was the progressive period. And then we moved into the New Deal period, and then the Great Society period, and the reinventing government period. All of these different eras of reform had their own kind of approach and their own adopting new types of technology or new understanding of the psychology of being human, or whatever it may be, or a different focus on representativeness or market-based reforms. But it's continual cycles of reform. Three major types: downsizing, reinventing or reengineering, and continuous improvement. They often kind of conflict with each other. Downsizing versus better service, business efficiency versus democratic accountability, continuous improvement versus revolutionary change. Let's tackle them. So downsizing. Government is too big and costs too much. This is what we hear all the time, right? The private sector is more efficient. Government crowds out private initiative. Taxpayers or customers being overcharged. Smaller governments, better government. There's some famous examples here in California, Prop 13, property tax limits, Taxpayer Bill of Rights in Colorado, revenue limits, and the Reagan-era federal workforce reduction. Real-world applications for downsizing: privatizing some utility and sanitation functions, contracting employees, shared services, permitting and benefits agencies, online applications, automated eligibility, shared services, self-service portals. You go to the DMV kiosk at Ralph's to renew your driver's license. Social services, contracted case management for some populations, electronic benefits delivery versus paper checks. So there's some benefits: lower costs, reduced bureaucracy, more flexibility. Competition-driven efficiency and service quality may decline, though, as a problem of this. Democratic accountability is weakened. Job losses, and if you privatize government or if you contract out, it's not like you're not paying for it anymore. You're just shifting the cost off the payroll of the government and onto the payroll of a private contractor, but you're still paying that private contractor. Reform 2: reinventing government. This is big in the 1990s, and government should work like a business. Government should steer, right? Give direction, but not row, not be the engine of movement. It should empower communities and families, inject competition, should be driven by mission, focus on results, meet customer needs, not bureaucracy's needs, earn rather than spend, solve problems through market mechanisms. So this is really big during the Clinton era. Al Gore was all over this kind of reinventing government movement. They cut hundreds of thousands of jobs at the federal level. They saved $108 billion over 5 years. Red tape was reduced. And they did this through a number of different ways of employee empowerment initiatives, one-stop service centers. The results were mixed. Some savings, some improvements. One certain result was, for the first time in a very long time, the budget was balanced. There was no deficit in the budget. As soon as the Clintons left the White House, then that deficit ballooned to where it is today and has kept growing. But we were actually in the black for a couple of years in the mid 90s. Reinventing public services. So some business style reforms. Schools, this is where you get charter schools, performance dashboards. We start talking about customer service and customer satisfaction, permitting and inspection, kind of a process redesign, a business type of process, to electronic filing, online payments, performance contracts for outcome-based payments to nonprofits, employee outcomes, results-oriented, cost effectiveness. Related is a re-engineering approach, and the core concept here is a fundamental redesign of work processes. So don't automate the existing processes, completely redesign them. You're focusing on the outcomes, not activities, not the outputs to get to the outcomes, but the outcomes themselves. Eliminate non-value added steps, use technology in new ways. A famous example is passport processing, from six weeks to 10 days by completely redesigning the entire process. A few examples here for permit processing, moving from paper files to electronic records, tax administration, paper returns to digital returns and instant refund processes, benefits intake. Instead of multiple office visits and paper forms, you have a single application, electronic records, and automated eligibility. Another reform type is continuous improvement. So small changes add up to big results. Employees are the closest to the work and know how to improve it. So the goal here is small incremental steps that are sustainable. And the idea that quality improvement never ends. You kind of use Six Sigma, TQMs, and other approaches like this. Applying continuous improvement. You have this in school environments. We have this certainly in our learning environment here at the university with your student learning outcomes, permitting and inspections, another place that they occur. All right, so those are the different types, and let's talk about why. Sometimes these whys are some crisis event, major scandals, a budget crisis, technology disruptions, and social movements. There's political motivations, electoral promises for change, interest group pressures, media attention, and there's practical motivations, citizen complaints, employee suggestions, and performance problems. What's happening now? So performance budgeting, you have kind of tying your budget allocations to outcome metrics. So are you achieving the outcome goals that you intended to achieve? If so, yes, we'll continue to fund this. If not, then we're going to pull back the funding. Open data performance dashboards. A lot of the research that I do is kind of built around open data, and I create performance dashboards, and evidence-based program design. Permitting service modernization, online applications, same-day processing, mobile apps, AI-assisted eligibility, workforce inclusion, skills-based hiring, pay equity issues, hybrid work, and flexible scheduling. All right, so delivery framework. So how do we deliver the kind of performance reform approaches that we have here? There's one example out of the UK: clear goals, strong leadership, good data, focused delivery, and political support. These kind of are all the kind of need for good reform. These are what is in place. These characteristics, according to these principles, need to be in place for reform to be successful. Reform does often fail, though. Change is hard, for one thing. Organizations resist reform. It could be because of fear of job loss, or they're just comfortable using the current procedures. when we had the pandemic and there was all this online work, all of a sudden you just saw, the kind of great retirement of people that said, no, I don't want to learn this new technology, so I'm just going to go ahead and retire. And that's kind of the organizational resistance idea. Sometimes the obstacles are political. Sometimes the obstacles are technological. And sometimes the reform just doesn't work right. So what makes it successful? Strong leadership, clear vision. Those who are impacted by it have to, buy into it, stakeholders, adequate resources. It should be adaptable. You learn by doing, and the reform should be flexible enough to allow the adaptability. And we talked about organizational culture. You have to consider that, right? You have to understand the values and the norms, and not just the procedures around it. Technology and modern reform. You have artificial intelligence, data analytics, mobile technology, social media, cloud computing. All of these kind of have reformed the way government is working. And that's brought opportunities and challenges. Emerging approaches to reform, evidence-based reform using research, pilot testing, rigorous evaluation of results, kind of reform steeped in science. Human-centered, so you think about the end user first, and especially if it's for the public, how are they going to interface with whatever government organization that they're working with, and think about their needs first. Think about agile government, so continuous improvement, quickly adapting to changing circumstances, and then network governance, collaboration across multiple boundaries. So if you've been kind of a insular organization and now you're having to network or collaborate with other organizations, that's certainly a different type of reform. So you going into public service, you'll be a leader in reform, right? So what do you need? Analytical skills, understand what's going on, understanding what is next. Political skills, you need coalitions. This isn't, going out there and running for an office, but this is building political skills within your organization. The coalitions for change, managing stakeholder expectations, thinking about how implementation can be done successfully, and then kind of thinking about the ethical stuff, right? Effective efficiency and fairness, democratic accountability, and the public interest. Reform in action, body-worn cameras. And we've seen some of the reform in action too with kind of the automated license plate readers and things like that, right? Where, there are some problems, police accountability and community trust with the body-worn cameras. And the reform type is technological. And so the challenges are technical, legal, organizational, and political. And successful reform requires addressing all of those, not just buying the technology and putting it on the cop. So here's some thoughts to consider. You can pause here and do that. All right, so the summary for this module 8. Administrative reform is continuous. We always, aim to reform. There's different types of it. Technology is creating new opportunities. Successful reform requires leadership, resources, and cultural change. Future reforms are going to emphasize evidence and user-centered design. And you'll be involved in reform one way or another, whether you are implementing it or designing it or being impacted by it. Reform is kind of ongoing and just a part of regular life and public service. All right, that's it for this module. We'll see you next time.